Hi, I hope you're having a great start to the new year. Today we're going to be talking about how to build your 2023 toolkit. More specifically, how to plan for your 2023, set goals, and actually work towards them. And finally, how to review your goals and keep yourself accountable. Within planning, we'll review 4 different journal prompts to get your mind moving and thinking. And I recommend that you respond to the journal prompts within real time. Then we'll talk about the wheel of my life, or in this case, your life. I'll discuss a framework with 5 different categories: physical, emotional, financial, social, and intellectual/spiritual to guide your goal setting. Finally, we'll talk about accountability and review strategies you can actually use to check in on yourself. Let's get into it. All right, first step, journal prompts for 2023. Grab a pen and paper and actually set out to answer these questions yourself. The first question is, what are some goals I would like to achieve this year? The second question is, what is something I dream of doing? The third question is, if I have time, I'd like to complete blank this year. For this question, focus on things that bring meaning to you specifically, not your friends, not your family. What's one thing that is extremely meaningful to you? Finally, set a timer for 2 minutes and list out the most important people and things to you. You can pause the video now. Okay, be honest with me. Are you done? Did you do it? You didn't do it? Pause the video and do it. It'll literally take 5 minutes. 5. Okay, now let's move on to goal setting and tips for goal setting. The way that I personally set my goals for 2023 is to focus on these 5 main categories within the wheel of my life, or in this case, your life. I set 1 main goal for physical, 1 main goal for emotional, 1 for financial, 1 for social, and then 1 for intellectual and spiritual. I'm going to pose 1 question for each of these categories to guide the way that you set your goal. I feel like setting a goal for each of these categories is totally reasonable. Rather than thinking about 1 big lofty goal, you're kind of just thinking about 5 main goals that you can work towards throughout the year. I also want to preface this section by saying that these are just some things that work for me, and what works for me might not work for you. So definitely keep that in mind when you're actually creating your goals for 2023. So first, let's start with physical. Ask yourself this: how can I nourish my body now? I wanted the statement to be not as much forward-looking, but something that you can act on today or at the very least tonight. This can be food, exercise, going outdoors, stretching, anything like that. For me, this year personally, I'm trying to follow a motto called choose my heart or choose your heart. So I can either eat more vegetables and go to the gym today, or feel groggy tomorrow or the day after or the day after. So that's just something that I'm trying to keep in mind for 2023. One thing that I've also found works for me is to eat more vegetables at breakfast and lunch. I know that a lot of us are used to eating like salads at lunch or sandwiches with like some side salad at lunch, but I feel like I never really think about incorporating vegetables into my breakfast. I guess maybe like tomatoes and cucumbers here and there, but I'm definitely trying to do more of that in 2023. I find that when I'm eating my vegetables a little bit earlier in the day, it helps me stay awake and feel more energized throughout the day and encourages me to get my vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. When it comes to staying active, I found that I'm personally trying to do more exercises to strengthen my core, my back, and other muscles to combat the amount of time that I spend working, editing, or just sitting as a whole. All right, let's move on to the next category, emotional. Answer this question for yourself. How can I practice mindfulness? Okay, did you answer it? Write it down. One thing that I'm personally trying to do this year is to improve my sleep quality. I'm trying to read a little bit more before bed and not reading on a screen like my iPad, but reading an actual physical book. I'm also trying to start my wind down like 3 hours before I go to bed. I feel like a lot of the time I used to think that preparing for bed within an hour of going to bed was enough for me, but I find that the earlier that I start my wind down, brushing my teeth, making sure all of the dishes are put away, the earlier I start to do all of that, the better that I feel when I actually start to go to bed. Another thing that I'm trying to do this year to practice mindfulness is to spend a lot less time on my phone. Less phone, less screen time, less all of that. I'm personally trying to make sure that at all times my phone, if it's possible, is way out of my reach, preferably in the next room, or if you live in a studio like me or in a small space, literally in the bathroom, like on the bathroom sink. Like just make sure that the phone doesn't fall into the bathroom sink. I'm also trying to do activities that don't typically involve my phone. Things like literally cooking dinner and not necessarily having to follow a recipe, but just chopping vegetables or chopping meat or preparing rice or any kind of food that you eat. Just trying to keep your phone out of those activities. Hiking, biking, doing more art, physically collaging something, knitting is something that I have tried to do this year, like a little bit if you watch one of my previous vlogs. Journaling, and also cleaning. Cleaning, people. Cleaning and tidying up your space is so huge. When my space is a mess, my brain is a mess. Even spending 2 minutes to just clean off your desk, to just clean off the floor, vacuum the floor, sweep the floor, put away the couple dishes from what you just ate, it is huge. The things that it does, oh, it's great. You need to use your body to physically do those things so you won't be on your phone. It's great. It's great. It's great. Next, let's move on to financial. The question that I have for you is, how can I practice financial well-being? Don't just spend less. Make a plan to understand your financial situation for the future. Make your life easier now. I personally like to use an app called Mint to get a better picture of my finances. I personally love Mint because it gives me the opportunity to understand all aspects of my personal financial health. I like that I can see my credit score, including any week-over-week changes. I like that I can connect my checking account, savings, investment accounts, credit cards, any outstanding loans. And I also really love that the app auto tracks your spending and breaks it up into individual categories. So some examples of those categories are listed here: auto and transport, bills and utilities, fees, food and dining, personal care, and travel. There's also subcategories beyond these. If you have an expense that isn't classified into any of the ones that I listed, there are a ton more categories. I just didn't feel like it was as valuable to include all of those categories on this page. I also want to call out another couple alternatives I've used to track my spending. I liked Rocket Money because the app easily let me see upcoming subscriptions, and I liked Personal Capital because I could see my income versus my expenses at any point. And I definitely don't want to discount the classic Excel spreadsheet to track your finances. I just recommend that you do your own research and find what works for you. There's also tons of free apps and other resources on the web. Another tip that I have is that if it's possible to turn on spending notifications through your bank's app. For example, whenever I use my credit card or Apple Pay to make a purchase, I get a notification from my bank that says exactly what I just bought and how much I just spent. I find that seeing this tiny pop-up just gives me a little bit more insight into my purchases and helps me understand my financial situation just a little bit better. Also, these pop-up notifications are kind of annoying. So maybe you'll spend less. Maybe. Is that just me? Let's move on to the next category, which is social. The question that I have for you is, how can I strengthen relationships in my life? Some tips that I have for you is to just call one person today. Pick anybody. Pick one person and just call them today. If it's really late at night, call someone tomorrow. Just see how they're doing. Another tip I have is to make plans ahead of time with friends, with people that you haven't seen in a while, with people that you have seen in a while. Make plans and stick to them. Maybe it's just the past couple of years, but I found myself reaching out to friends less often. Something that I've been trying to do since last year and this year as well is just to reach out to those people more. Make plans with friends and family and just stick to those plans. If you're not sure how you're going to feel then, it's fine. Just make the plans. It matters. The final category is intellectual and spiritual. And the question that I want to ask you is, what are daily practices I can follow to achieve my goals? And I kind of want to split these up into two different categories. So for intellectual, I want to talk a little bit about skill building. And then for spiritual, I kind of want to talk about gratitude, mindfulness, meditation. But really, you can kind of set goals for either of these depending on what works for you, or set goals for both, or just think about both in the context of them together. For skill building, I just want to talk about the importance of continuously learning beyond the classroom, beyond being a student, and especially post-grad. Skill building is something that I'm personally constantly trying to focus on. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about new topics when it comes to personal finance, learning how to code, content creation. There's probably a topic out there that you want to learn more about. Skill building is a perfect opportunity and hone in on just one of those skills to push your mind a little bit further. Personally, to keep myself engaged while reading or watching a video on a new topic, I love to take notes. I am an avid note taker, and I think that taking notes is like the biggest hack of the century. I think taking notes is a hack. Let me explain. To keep myself engaged while reading or watching videos about a new topic, I like to keep my hands moving. This manifests itself in typing notes in my own words while I learn. This is applicable at school, at work, anything that you're doing. Taking notes while you're watching, listening, or reading something helps your mind stay focused, your hands stay busy, and I find that you retain the information a little bit faster. When it comes to spiritual, I like to focus on being intentional, being grateful, practicing mindfulness and meditation, and really just doing anything that I can to have a clear head. This might also take the form of just journaling a couple sentences in the morning. Doesn't need to be a whole page, doesn't need to be a whole prompt, but just writing a couple things about what you're planning to do today. Another thing that I've been loving to do recently is time blocking my day. I don't use any fancy planner, I don't use any fancy paper, I literally just use a notebook that I and you probably have laying around, and I literally write out all of the half-hour intervals on the left side from 7:30 a.m. until 9 p.m. So 7:30, 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, 10, you get the point. So on the left side, it's the time, and then on the right side is a one-liner of the activity or activities I'm planning to complete in a half hour. You'd be amazed to see how much you can actually achieve within those 30 minutes, and I feel like by time blocking my activities into 30-minute intervals, I get a clear picture of what I should be focusing on within that half-hour time frame, always giving myself breaks throughout the day. This technique helps me visualize exactly what I should be working on and also makes me more encouraged to cross off tasks in the to-do list as I complete them. For me, I personally felt like the conventional to-do lists were a never-ending list of things that I needed to accomplish, but by time blocking, I have an idea of exactly how long something should take, and I try to time block it in that frame. If you don't know how long something is expected to take, I think just have a guesstimate. If it runs over, if it runs under, I think that's not a big deal. But eventually funneling your thinking into projecting the right amount of time it takes to complete a certain task. And also, if you have a really big, daunting task like writing a paper or planning for an upcoming work project, I think just splitting up that project or that task into tiny little steps. Like, for example, writing out the first paragraph outline or writing out the first framework for the slides. I think focusing on individual smaller tasks like that instead of writing that I need to complete this large and daunting task will be easier on your mind and a little bit easier to digest. Finally, let's move on to the last step, reviewing your goals, but most importantly, keeping yourself accountable. Start with 10 minutes a day for each of these. If 10 minutes a day seems like a lot for each of these categories, remember that you've already probably made some strides in some of these areas. And maybe you just need to dedicate 5 minutes to that goal or to that category today. We only have 5 categories on our wheel, right? That amounts to 50 minutes a day. Less than 1 hour of little things that you can do every single day to work towards your goal. Split them up and just make them more manageable. You'd be surprised with everything that you can achieve with just 10 minutes a day. Finally, the last thing that I'll say. One of the hardest things about growing up is keeping yourself accountable for your successes, for your failures. It all comes down to whether you're willing to put in the work to keep trying or to give up on your goals and aspirations. 2023 is your year. You can do it, you can set out to accomplish your goals, and you can make strides every single day to push your dreams a little bit further. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!